Diane Foster's voice was sharp and dismissive. "Sir, this is private property. You're trespassing. That deed is outdated. This land was purchased at a tax auction in 2022 by Crestview Development. They sold the lots to the homeowners. You don't own this land anymore?" Like 2 years overseas could erase what the deed had proven since. 1987. Like a fraudulent tax auction could override the fact that I'd paid every property tax bill on time while deployed serving my country. What she didn't know was that I had the bank records proving the taxes were never delinquent and the emailware. Marcus Bellamy offered a county clerk $15,000 to falsify the records. This wasn't a legitimate tax sale or legal acquisition. 9 acres of inherited land. 6 luxury homes built while I was deployed. A developer who'd bribed a county official forged tax documents and sold homes for $800,000 to $1.2 million each on property he never owned. Marcus made the mistake every fraudulent developer makes, assuming that a deployed soldier wouldn't come back or wouldn't notice 6 mansions built on his 9 acres, and that 2 years was long enough to build, sell, and disappear before anyone questioned the paperwork. It wasn't. Over 8 months, I watched Marcus Bellamy discover what happens when you bribe a county clerk to falsify tax records. Build $5.8 million in homes on stolen land, and tell the real owner he's trespassing when he comes home from deployment. This is the story of how a developer lost his freedom, his company, and 4 years of his life in federal prison because he couldn't answer one question the prosecutor asked. "Did you know the property taxes were current when you paid the clerk to mark them delinquent?" Not because I wanted to destroy him, because property law doesn't care how much you built or how many families bought homes. It cares who owns the land. And what happens when you forge documents to steal property from a deployed service? But let me start from the beginning. Before we dive into, I'd love to know where you're listening from today. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons for more interesting stories. Just like this, I inherited 9 acres of undeveloped land from my grandmother. In March 2021, the property was in rural Georgia, about an hour outside of Atlanta. Rolling terrain, mostly wooded. The small clearing where my grandmother had once planned to build a retirement home. She'd bought the land in 1987 for $18,000, paid off the mortgage by 1995, and held on to it for the rest of her life. When she passed away at 86, the land came to me. I was her only grandchild. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 19. My grandmother had raised me from that point forward. The property wasn't much, 9 acres of trees, gravel access road, and a small creek running through the back corner, but it was mine. And it was paid for. I'd planned to develop it eventually, maybe build a house, maybe sell it. But in April 2021, those plans got put on hold. I received deployment orders. I was active duty Army, stationed at Fort Benning, and I was being sent overseas for an 80-month rotation. The deployment got extended twice, and I ended up being gone for just over 2 years, April 2021 to June 2023, before I left. I set up autopay for the property taxes through my grandmother's estate account, which I'd been managing as executor. I filed a change of address with the county so any mail would be forwarded to my APO address overseas. I locked the gate at the access road and posted no trespassing signs, and then I left. I returned to the States in June 2023. 2 years and 2 months after I'd left, I spent the first week back processing out of active duty, visiting friends, catching up on sleep. On June 18th, I decided to drive out to the property to check on it. I hadn't thought about the land much while I was overseas. It was undeveloped, unoccupied, and as far as I knew, untouched. I figured I'd find it exactly as I'd left it, overgrown. Quiet, waiting. I was wrong. I took Highway 85 south out of Atlanta, then turned onto the county road that led to my property. The route was familiar. I'd driven it dozens of times with my grandmother over the years, but as I approached the turnoff to the access road, I noticed something different. A sign, a large, professional sign, at the entrance to what used to be my gravel driveway, now paved and widened into a 2-lane road. The sign read, "Heritage Hills, a gated community." I slowed the truck, staring at the sign. Heritage Hills. I turned onto the road. My road and followed it up a gentle slope. After about a quarter mile, I reached a gate, a massive wrought iron gate, flanked by stone pillars and aguados. Beyond the gate, I could see homes. 6 of them, arranged in a semicircle around a cul-de-sac. Large homes, 2 stories, brick and stone facades, manicured lawns, 3-car garages. I stopped the truck and got out. My heart pounding. This was my property. I knew it was. I'd walked this land 100 times. The gravel road I'd driven on as a kid had run right through here. It's cutting through the trees to the clearing where my grandmother's property sat. But now it was paved, gated, developed, and there were 6 houses, where there should have been nothing but trees. I walked up to the gate. A man in a security uniform stepped out of the guardhouse. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm looking for my property," I said. "This used to be undeveloped land. 9 acres. I inherited it from my grandmother." The guard looked confused. "Sir, this is Heritage Hills. It's a private gated community. If you're looking for a property, you'll need to contact the sales office. I'm not looking to buy. I own this land." The guard's expression shifted, polite but skeptical. "Sir, this community was developed 2 years ago. All the homes are privately owned. If you think there's been a mistake, you'll need to talk to the HOA. Who's the HOA president? Ms. Diane Foster? But I can't let you in without an appointment." It pulled out my phone and took photos of the gate, the homes, the sign. Then I walked back to my truck, my mind racing. I called a property attorney the next morning, a man named Michael Brennan, who'd been recommended by a friend. I explained the situation. I'd inherited 9 acres, left for 2 years, and returned. To find a gated community built on my land, Brennan was silent for a moment. Then, "Do you have the deed?" "Yes. It's in my grandmother's name, transferred to me through probate in 2021. Bring it to my office, and bring any tax records you have. We need to confirm ownership before we do anything else." I met with Brennan. That afternoon, he reviewed the deed, the probate documents, and the property tax records from my grandmother's estate account. "The deed is clear," Brennan said. "You own 9 acres, described by meets and bounds. Recorded in 1987, the legal description matches the location you described. But if someone built on your land, they either made a catastrophic surveying error or they knew exactly what they were doing. How do I find out? We run a title search, see if anyone else claims ownership. And we contact the county to see if there's been any transfer of title while you were gone. How long will that take? A few days? I'll call you when I have answers." Brennan called me on June 22nd. "You have a problem," he said. "What kind of problem?" "According to county records, your property was sold at a tax auction in October 2022. The buyer was a development company called Crestview Development, LLC. They claim they purchased the land for $12,000 due to unpaid property taxes." I felt my stomach drop. "That's impossible. The taxes were on auto pay. I pulled the payment records from your estate account. You're right, the taxes were paid every year, on time. But the county has a record showing the taxes were delinquent and the property was auctioned. How is that possible? Either the county made a clerical error or someone falsified the records. I'm leaning toward the latter. Can they do that? Not legally. But if someone forged documents showing that taxes were unpaid, and the county processed a tax deed without verifying, it could have slipped through. The fact that you were overseas and unreachable made you an easy target. So what do? We file a lawsuit. Quiet title action, fraud, trespassing, unjust enrichment. We're going after the developer, the county, and anyone else involved. We demand either removal of the structures or compensation." "How much compensation?" Brennan paused. "If those homes are worth what I think they are, $800,000 to $1.2 million each, we're talking about $5 million to $7 million in improvements built on your land. You're entitled to either the fair market value of the land or a share of the value of the improvements or rent for the unauthorized use." This is a massive case. I drove back out to Heritage Hills the next day, this time with a copy of the deed in my hand. I parked outside the gate and walked up to the guardhouse. The same security guard was there. "I need to speak to Diane Foster," I said, "the HOA president. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I own this property and I need to speak with her now." The guard called someone on his radio. 5 minutes? Later, a woman in her mid-50s walked down to the gate. She was dressed in business casual, holding a tablet, her expression impatient. "I'm Diane Foster. Can I help you? I'm Alex Carter. I own the 9 acres this community is built on. I inherited the land from my grandmother, and I never authorized any development." Diane's expression hardened. "Sir, this is private property. You're trespassing." "No, I'm not. This is my property. I have the deed right here." I held up the document. Diane glanced at it dismissively. "That deed is outdated. This land was purchased at a tax auction in 2022 by Crestview Development. They sold the lots to the homeowners. You don't own this land anymore?" "I never stopped paying the property taxes. The county records are wrong." "That's not my problem. If you have a dispute with the county, take it up with them. But you need to leave before I call the sheriff." "Call them," I said, "because I'm filing a lawsuit. When the title search is complete, you're going to find out that every home in this community was built on land the developer didn't own." Diane's face paled slightly, but she didn't respond. She turned and walked back up the driveway, pulling out her phone. Brennan's title search came back 3 days later. The results were damning. The tax auction documents filed with the county in October 2022 were fraudulent. The property taxes had been paid on time through the estate account. Brennan had the bank records to prove it, but someone had submitted forged documents to the county showing the taxes were delinquent. The county clerk had processed a tax deed without verifying the payment records. And Crestview Development had purchased my land for $12,000. Within 6 months, they'd built 6 luxury homes and sold them for $800,000 to $1.2 million each. Total revenue to the developer, approximately $5.8 million. Total cost to me, 9 acres of land I'd inherited. Stolen while I was deployed overseas. Brennan filed the lawsuit on June 8th, and the real battle was about to begin. The lawsuit was filed on June 28th in the Superior Court of Henry County. Georgia Carter v. Crestview Development LLC, Henry County. And Heritage Hills Homeowners Association claims quiet title action, fraud, forgery, trespassing, unjust enrichment. Demand for removal of structures or fair market compensation. Michael Brennan had structured the complaint carefully. Crestview Development was named as the primary defendant for fraudulently acquiring my land and building on it without legal ownership. Henry County was named for processing a tax deed based on falsified records. And the HOA was named as an interested party since the homeowners now occupied structures built on my property. The complaint was 42 pages long, supported by the original deed from 1987, the probate transfer to me in 2021, bank records showing continuous property tax payments, and the fraudulent tax auction documents filed in October 2022. Brennan's cover letter to Crestview's registered agent was direct. Your client built 6 homes on land they do not own. Mr. Carter is the rightful owner and demands immediate compensation or removal of all structures. Crestview Development's response came 8 days later, not from their registered agent, but from a law firm in Atlanta, Whitmore and Associates. The response was aggressive and dismissive. Frivolous claims against Crestview Development LLC Mr. Brennan, your client's claims are without merit. Crestview Development LLC lawfully purchased the subject property at a public tax auction held by Henry County in October 2022. The property was delinquent on taxes for multiple years, and the county followed proper procedures in conducting the SCH auction. Crestview acquired legal title through the tax deed process. Your client's alleged prior ownership is irrelevant. Tax deed sales extinguish prior interests when proper notice is given and statutory requirements are met. Your demand for removal of structures is absurd and unenforceable. 6 families have purchased homes in good faith. Any attempt to displace them will be met with vigorous legal opposition. We strongly advise your client to withdraw this lawsuit immediately. If he persists, Crestview will seek sanctions for filing a frivolous claim. and we will pursue all available counterclaims. I read the letter twice, my anger rising with each sentence. They're bluffing, Brennan said when I called him. They know. They're in trouble, so they're trying to intimidate you into walking away. Can they get sanctions against me? No. Your claim isn't frivolous, supported by documentary evidence. They're the ones who should be worried about sanctions. What do we do next? Respond politely, and we start discovery. I want every document Crestview has related to that tax auction, every email, every invoice, every communication with the county. If they forged records, we'll find proof. The response from the homeowners came faster than I expected. On July 10th, I received a certified letter from Diane Foster on behalf of the Heritage Hills HOA. Demand for immediate resolution, Mr. Carter. We are writing on behalf of the 6 families who own homes in Heritage Hills. We purchased our properties in good faith from Crestview. It's development between April and August 2023. We paid between $800,000 and $1.2 million per home. We have mortgages, title insurance, and recorded deeds. Your lawsuit threatens to destroy our homes and our financial security. We demand that you immediately dismiss your claims against the HOA and negotiate directly with Crestview Development. If you refuse, we will intervene in the lawsuit to protect our interests. We have retained counsel and are prepared to fight. You cannot displace 6 families because of a dispute over property taxes. We urge you to act reasonably. I handed the letter to Brennan. He read it and shook his head. They're panicking. And I don't blame them. They bought homes built on land the developer didn't own. Their title insurance probably won't cover this because it's fraught by the seller. They're looking at losing everything. Not my fault. No, it's not. It's going to complicate the case. The homeowners are innocent third parties. A judge might be reluctant to order removal of the homes because of the hardship it would cause. So what's my leverage? Rent. If they can't afford to buy the land from you, they can lease it. You retain ownership. They pay you monthly rent for the ground under their homes. It's called a ground lease. It's common in commercial real estate. Less common in residential, but it works. How much rent? Brennan pulled up a spreadsheet. Fair market rent for 9 acres of developed land with 6 luxury homes. Probably Iwan Baten to Launwan Mayen per month. That's $3,000 to $3,500 per household. That's on top of their mortgages, but it's better than losing the homes entirely. I thought about it. $18,000 a month. Over $200,000 a year for land that had been stolen from me while I was deployed overseas. Let's see what discovery turns up first, I said. If Crestview committed fraud, I want them held accountable before I negotiate with anyone. Discovery began in August. Brennan subpoenaed Crestview Development's records related to the tax auction. Communications with the county, financial records showing the $12,000 purchase, and all documents related to the development and sale of Heritage Hills. He also subpoenaed Henry County's records, the tax delinquency notices, the auction posting, and any communications with Crestview. Prior to the auction, what we found was explosive. The first red flag was the tax delinquency notice. According to Georgia law, before a property can be auctioned for unpaid taxes, the county must send notice to the property owner at their last known address. The notice must be sent certified mail, and the owner has a right to cure the delinquency before the auction. The county's records showed a delinquency. Notice had been sent to my grandmother's address, the address I'd lived at as a kid, but which had been sold years ago after she moved into assisted living. The notice was returned as undelivered. But here's the problem. I'd filed a change of address with the county before I deployed. My APO address was on file. Any mail related to the property should have been forwarded to me overseas. Brennan found the change of address form in the county's records. It was dated March 2021. It was filed 2 weeks before I left. So why had the delinquency notice been sent to the old address instead of my current address? Brennan filed a motion to compel the county to explain. The second red flag was the tax payment records. The county claimed my property taxes were delinquent for 2021 and 2022. But the bank records from my grandmother's estate account showed payments made in full, on time. In both years, Brennan brought the bank statements to a meeting with the county attorney on August 15th. These payments were processed, Brennan said, laying the statements on the table. The estate account shows debits for property, tax payments in April 2021 and April 2022. The county received the money. Why does your system show the taxes as unpaid? The county attorney, a man named Richard Klein, reviewed the statements, his expression growing increasingly uncomfortable. I don't have an answer, Klein said. I'll need to check with the tax assessor's office. Do that. Because if your office processed a tax deed based on false delinquency records, you've got a serious problem. The third red flag, and the one that blew the case wide open, came from Crestview's email records. Brennan had subpoenaed all communications between Crestview and the county related to the tax auction. Most of the emails were routine requests for information, auction notices, procedural questions, but one email, sent from Crestview's CEO Marcus Bellamy to a county clerk named Jessica Thornton, was anything but routine. Email, September 12, 2022, from Marcus Bellamy, MBELLAMY, at CRESTVIEWDev.com, to Jessica Thornton, JTHORNTON, at henrycountyga.gov. Subject: Property acquisition, urgent. Jessica, we need that Carter property to go to auction in October. I know the taxes are technically current, but we're on a tight timeline with investors, and we need to move fast. Can you process the tax deed as delinquent? I'll make it worth your trouble. $15K cash once the deed is recorded. Let me know. Marcus Brennan forwarded me the email with a single word: jackpot. Jessica Thornton's response, sent 2 days later, was equally damning. Email, September 14, 2022, from Jessica Thornton to Marcus Bellamy. Subject: RE. Property acquisition, urgent. Marcus, I can adjust the records to show the 2021 and 2022 taxes as unpaid. The delinquency notice will go to the old address on file. Property owner is overseas. Won't see it. Auction will proceed as scheduled in October. Payment terms accepted. Deposit to account ending in 40-1. JB Renan called me immediately. This is fraud, conspiracy, bribery of a public official. Bellamy paid a county clerk $15,000 to falsify tax records so he could steal your land. Can we use this in court? Absolutely. And we're forwarding it to the district attorney. This is criminal. On August 22nd, Brennan filed an amended complaint, adding criminal fraud claims and demanding punitive damages the same day. He sent copies of the emails to the Henry County District Attorney's Office and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. On August 24th, Marcus Bellamy's attorney called Brennan. My client wants to settle. Too late, Brennan said. Your client committed fraud, bribed a public official, and stole my client's property. We're not settling. We're going to trial. Your client's going to prison. On August 28th, Jessica Thornton was arrested at her home and charged with bribery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and falsifying public records. On August 30th, Marcus Bellamy was arrested at Crestview's office and charged with fraud, bribery, and theft by deception. The local news ran the story that evening. Developer charged with bribing county official to steal land. The headline in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution the next day: Homeowners discover their luxury homes were built on stolen land. And suddenly, Heritage Hills, the gated community, built on my 9 acres, was national news. Diane Foster called me on September 1st. Her voice was tight, strained. Mr. Carter, we need to talk. The homeowners are willing to negotiate. We don't. Want to lose our homes? Please, let's find a solution. I thought about the 6 families living on my land. Families who'd paid $800,000 to $1.2 million for homes they thought were built on legally acquired property. They were victims too. But so was I and Marcus Bellamy, the man who had stolen my land while I was deployed, who'd bribed a county official, who'd built 6 luxury homes and pocketed nearly $6 million, was going to pay for what he'd done. One way or another, the criminal investigation moved fast. On September 5th, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation executed search warrants at Crestview Development's office, Marcus Bellamy's home, and Jessica Thornton's residence. They seized computers, phones, financial records, and filing cabinets full of documents. Brennan called me that afternoon. The GBI agents found more. Bellamy had been targeting properties with out-of-state or overseas owners for years. Your land wasn't the first time he'd done this. How many others? At least 3 other properties in Georgia, same pattern falsified. Tax records, bribed county officials, fraudulent auctions. The DA is building a RICO case. What does that mean for my case? It means Bellamy's going to prison for a long time, and it strengthens our civil case. Fraud, conspiracy, theft, all documented. On September 8th, the Heritage Hills homeowners filed a motion to intervene in my lawsuit. The motion was filed by their attorney, a woman named Sarah Kendall from a firm in Atlanta, Mand. It outlined the homeowners' position. The interveners are 6 families who purchased homes in Heritage Hills in good faith between April and August 2023. They paid fair market value, obtained mortgages from reputable lenders, and received title insurance. They had no knowledge that Crestview Development had fraudulently acquired the underlying land. The interveners faced the potential loss of their homes and their entire investment totaling over $5 million collectively. They seek to intervene in this lawsuit to protect their interests and negotiate a fair resolution with plaintiff. The motion was granted on September 12th. The homeowners were now official parties to the case. Sarah Kendall called Brennan the next day. My clients want to meet with you and Mr. Carter. They're willing to negotiate. They don't want to fight. They want to find a solution. Brennan and I met with the homeowners and their attorney on September 15th at Kendall's office in downtown Atlanta. All 6 families were represented, 12 adults total, sitting around a large conference table, their faces tense and exhausted. Diane Foster spoke first. Mr. Carter, we didn't know. We bought our homes from Crestview in good faith. We were told the land was legally acquired. We had no idea Marcus Bellamy had stolen it. Another homeowner, a man named James Rickey, added, We've put our life savings into these homes. If we lose them, we lose everything. We're asking you to work with us. I looked at the faces around the table. These weren't the people who'd stolen my land. They were victims, 2 victims of Marcus Bellamy's fraud, but they were living on my property. I had the legal right to do something about it. Brennan laid out my options. Option 1, demand. Removal of all structures under Georgia law. If someone builds on your land without permission, you can demand removal of the structures at the trespasser's expense. In this case, that would mean tearing down 6 luxury homes, restoring the land to its original condition, and evicting the families. This is the nuclear option, Brennan said. It's legally defensible, but it's also the most destructive. The homeowners lose everything. You get your land back, but you'll spend years in court fighting their appeals. The homeowners stared at the table, saying nothing. Option 2, sell the land to the homeowners. Could sell the 9 acres to the homeowners at fair market value, giving them legal ownership of the land under their homes. But there was a problem. The land wasn't worth $18,000 anymore. Brennan had hired an appraiser to evaluate the property. With 6 luxury homes built on it, the land was now worth approximately $2.440,000 per lot. That's current market rate for developed residential land in this area, Brennan said. If the homeowners want to buy the land outright, they'd each need to come up with $400,000 on top of the mortgages they already have. James Ricci shook his head. Can't afford that. We're already stretched paying our mortgages. Most of us put down 20% when we bought. We don't have another $400,000, Diane Foster added. We've talked to our lenders. They won't give us second mortgages for this. Our title insurance companies are denying the claims. We're stuck. Option 3. Ground lease. The third option was a ground lease, a long-term lease agreement where I retained ownership of the land and the homeowners paid me monthly rent for the right to keep their homes on my property. This is the compromise option, Brennan said. Keep the land, they keep the homes. Everyone moves forward. How much rent? I asked. Brennan pulled up the appraiser's report. Fair market rent for 9 acres of developed residential land with 6 luxury homes is approximately $18,000 per month. It's $3,000 per household. I did the math. $18,000 per month, $216,000 per year, for land I'd inherited. Land that had been stolen while I was overseas, land I'd almost lost permanently. Sarah Kendall looked at her clients, then at me. Mr. Carter, my clients are willing to consider a ground lease, but $3,000 per month is on top of their existing mortgage payments. For some of them, that's $6,000 to $7,000 per month total. It's a hardship. It's also a hardship to lose your land while you're deployed, I said. I didn't ask for this. Marcus Bellamy stole my property. I'm the victim here, too. Diane Foster's voice was tight. We understand that. But we're also victims. We paid Bellamy nearly $6 million for homes built on land he didn't own. We're not the enemy. He is. She was right, and I knew it. While the homeowners and I were negotiating, Marcus Bellamy's world was collapsing. On September 18th, a federal judge froze Crestview Development's assets pending the outcome of the criminal case. The company's bank accounts were locked. Construction projects were halted. Investor funds were placed in escrow. Bellamy's personal attorney filed an emergency motion to unfreeze the accounts, arguing that the asset freeze would irreparably harm the business. The judge denied the motion. Mr. Bellamy is charged with fraud, bribery, and theft. The state has shown a substantial likelihood that the assets in question were obtained through criminal activity. The freeze will remain in place. On September 22nd, Crestview Development filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The filing listed over $12 million in debts, including mortgages on undeveloped land, unpaid contractor invoices, and pending lawsuits, including mine. Brennan called me when the bankruptcy was announced. This is a delay tactic. Bellamy's trying to shield his assets and drag out the litigation, but it won't work. We'll pursue him personally, and the criminal cases separate. Bankruptcy doesn't stop that. The media coverage exploded in late September. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran a front-page story on September 24th. Homeowners discover their million-dollar homes are built on someone else's land. The article detailed the entire Sagamai inheritance, Bellamy's bribery scheme, the falsified tax records, the criminal charges, and the 6 families now facing potential eviction. The story was picked up by national outlets. CNN ran a segment. NPR did a radio interview with Sarah Kendall. The Washington Post published an op-ed titled, "When Developers Steal Land, Who Pays the Price?" Public opinion was divided. Some people sympathized with me. He's a veteran who had his land stolen while deployed. He deserves full compensation. Others sympathized with the homeowners. These families bought homes in good faith. You can't punish them for the developer's crimes. And everyone agreed on one thing: Marcus Bellamy belonged in prison. On September 28th, the Heritage Hills HOA made a formal settlement offer. Sarah Kendall presented it in a conference call with Brennan and me. My clients are offering $500,000 to purchase the land outright. It's everything they can collectively afford without taking on additional debt. They're asking you to accept it as full and final settlement. I looked at Brennan. He shook his head slightly. That's less than a quarter of the appraised value, Brennan said. The land is worth $2.4 million with the improvements. You're asking my client to take in $1.9 million loss. We understand, Kendall said, but my clients can't afford $2.4 million. This is their best offer. I thought about it. $500,000 was a lot of money, but it wasn't fair compensation for what I'd lost. Counteroffer. Ground lease, per household per month. 99-year lease term. The homeowners keep their homes, I keep the land, and everyone moves forward. Kendall was silent for a moment. I'll present it to my clients. The appraiser's report became the centerpiece of the negotiation. It was detailed and unambiguous. Fair market value of 9 acres of undeveloped land, pre-construction, $180,000. Fair market value of 9 acres with 6 luxury homes, current condition, $2.4 million. Fair market rental value, $18,000 per month. Brennan walked me through the numbers. If you lease the land, you're generating $216,000 per year in passive income. Over a 91-year lease, that's over $21 million in total revenue. Adjusted for inflation, it's even more. Compare that to a one-time sale at $2.4 million. The ground lease is the better long-term investment, What if they stop paying rent? Then you evict them and retake possession of the land, with the improvements. You'd own 6 luxury homes, free and clear. The lease protects you either way. On October 10th, the Heritage Hills homeowners agreed to the ground lease proposal, with modifications. Sarah Kendall presented the counter-proposal, $2,500 per household per month instead of $3,000, and a one-time payment of $50,000 per household to you as consideration for entering the lease. I did the math. $2,500 per household per month equals $15,000 per month equals $180,000 per year, plus $50,000 x households equals $300,000 up front. It was less than the appraised rental value, but it was close, and the $300,000 upfront payment was something. I'll agree to $2,750 per month, I said. That's $16,500 per month total. And the $50,000 per household up front? Final offer. Kendall conferred with her clients. 3 days later, she called back. We have a deal. Marcus Bellamy had stolen my land. Jessica Thornton had helped him do it. 6 families had unknowingly bought homes built on property that was never legally sold. Now those families were negotiating with me to lease the land they thought they owned. And Marcus Bellamy? He was facing federal fraud charges, asset forfeiture, and years in prison. The ground lease would generate $16,500 per month, $198,000 per year. For land I'd almost lost. For property stolen while I was serving my country overseas. And now, I was about to become the landlord of 6 luxury homes I never asked for. But I was also about to make sure Marcus Bellamy paid for what he'd done. One way or another. Discovery in the civil case continued through October, and what we found made Marcus Bellamy's fraud even more damning. Brennan had subpoenaed Crestview Development's internal communications, emails, text messages, board meeting minutes, financial projections. What emerged was a picture of a developer who knew exactly what he was doing and did it anyway. The smoking gun came in an email chain from July 2022, 3 months before the fraudulent tax auction. Email July 18, 2022, from Marcus Bellamy to Richard Torres. Crestview CFO. Subject, Heritage Hills. Timeline, Rich. Investors are breathing down my neck. They want to see ground broken by November, or they're pulling out. We're still short. 1 parcel for the full development, the Carter land. I know the owner's overseas and the taxes are current, but we need that land. I'm working on a solution. Don't ask questions. Just be ready to move fast once I secure it. -M email July 20th, 2022 from Richard Torres to Marcus Bellamy. Subject, Heritage Hills timeline. Marcus, if the taxes are current, we can't acquire it through auction. What's the plan? Email July 20th, 2022 from Marcus Bellamy to Richard Torres. Subject, Heritage Hills timeline. I said don't ask questions. I have a contact at the county who can help. The owner's deployed overseas. He won't even know until it's too late. By the time he comes back, we'll have homes built and sold. He'll have no choice but to settle. Brennan highlighted the exchange. He knew the taxes were current. He knew you were overseas. And he planned to steal your land because his investors were pressuring him to deliver. Can we use this? Absolutely. This shows intent, premeditation, and knowledge that what he was doing was illegal. The next batch of documents showed how Bellamy had covered his tracks during the home sales. When Crestview sold the 6 homes in Heritage Hills between April and August 2023, they'd submitted title documents to the buyers' title insurance companies. Those documents included the fraudulent tax deed showing Crestview's legal acquisition of my land, but Bellamy had gone further. He'd submitted a forged county certification, a document that appeared to be signed by the county clerk, stating that all property taxes were current and no liens existed on the property. The document was dated March 2023 and bore what looked like an official county seal, but the county had never issued it. Brennan obtained the original county records. There was no certification on file. The document Bellamy had submitted to the title companies was a complete fabrication. He forged a county document to convince the title companies the sale was legitimate, Brennan said. That's a federal offense. Mail fraud, wire fraud, forgery of government documents. The FBI is going to love this. The homeowner's title insurance situation was even worse than they'd feared. In late October, all 6 families received denial letters from their title insurance companies. The letters were nearly identical, citing the same exclusion clause. Coverage is excluded for losses arising from fraudulent conveyance by the seller or any party in the chain of title. The insured property was acquired by the seller through fraud and forgery. This exclusion applies. Claim denied. Diane Foster called me on October 24th, her voice breaking. Our title insurance won't cover this. We're on our own. If we lose the homes, we lose everything. Our down payments, the equity, everything. We have nowhere to go. James Ricci sent me an email the same day. Mr. Carter, I'm a high school teacher. My wife's a nurse. We saved for 10 years to buy this house. We have 2 kids. If we're evicted, we'll be financially ruined. We're not asking for charity. We're willing to pay fair rent. We just need a chance to keep our home. I read the emails and felt the weight of the situation settling on my shoulders. These families hadn't stolen my land. They hadn't bribed anyone. They hadn't forged documents. They had bought homes in good faith, trusting that the developer had legal ownership, and now they were facing eviction and financial ruin because Marcus Bellamy had committed fraud. Brennan and I met at his office on October 26th to discuss strategy. You have all the leverage here, Brennan said. The law is entirely on your side. You can demand removal of the homes, full compensation, or any settlement terms you want. The homeowners have no legal defense. But they're victims too. They are. And that's going to matter to a judge. If this goes to trial, the judge is going to look at 6 families facing eviction and ask if there's a less destructive solution. But legally, you're in the driver's seat. What would you do? Brennan leaned back in his chair. If it were me, I'd use the leverage to get the best deal possible, financially and morally. You can't let Bellamy off the hook. He needs to pay. But the homeowners? They're pawns in this. If you can find a way to let them stay without giving up your rights, that's the win. The ground lease. Exactly. You keep the land. They keep the homes. You get ongoing income. And Bellamy pays the price in criminal court. The preliminary hearing in Marcus Bellamy's criminal case was held on October 30th. I attended, sitting in the gallery with Brennan. Bellamy sat at the defense table, flanked by 2 attorneys, looking pale and drawn. Prosecutor, an assistant U.S. attorney named Catherine Mills, laid out the charges. Bribery of a public official, conspiracy to commit fraud, theft by deception, forgery of government documents, wire fraud, related to the falsified title documents, mail fraud. Mills presented the evidence. The emails, the $15,000 payment to Jessica Thornton, the forged tax deed, the falsified county certification. The judge, a federal magistrate named Alan Howell, reviewed the evidence and set bail at $500,000. Bellamy's attorney argued for a lower amount. Your Honor, my client is a respected businessman with no prior criminal record. He's not a flight risk. Judge Howell looked unimpressed. Your client bribed a public official, stole land from a deployed service member, and forged government documents to cover it up. Bail is set at $500,000. Next hearing is December 10th. Bellamy posted bail 2 days later, but his assets remained frozen. On November 3rd, the civil case was called for a status conference before Judge Monica Delgado in Henry County Superior Court. All parties were present. Me, Brennan, the 6 homeowners, and their attorney Sarah Kendall, representatives from Crestview Development, now in bankruptcy, and the Henry County Attorney's Office. Judge Delgado reviewed the case file, her expression serious. This is one of the most complicated property disputes I've seen, she said. We have a plaintiff who clearly owns the land. We have 6 families who bought homes in good faith, and we have a developer facing criminal charges for fraud. Nobody wins if this goes to trial. She looked at me. Mr. Carter, what are you seeking? Compensation for my land? Either fair market value for the property or a ground lease arrangement that allows the homeowners to stay while I retain ownership. And the homeowners? Sarah Kendall stood. Your Honor, my clients want to stay in their homes. They're willing to enter a ground lease if the terms are reasonable. They've offered $2,500 per household per month plus a one-time payment of $50,000 per household. Judge Delgado made notes. And the developer? Restview's bankruptcy attorney stood. Your Honor, Crestview Development is in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Any settlement or judgment will be subject to the bankruptcy proceedings. Judge Delgado's expression hardened. I'm ordering mediation. All parties will attend a court-supervised mediation session within 30 days. You will negotiate in good faith. And if you don't reach a settlement, this case goes to trial. She looked directly at me. Mr. Carter, if this goes to trial, you have 3 potential outcomes. 1. The homes are demolished and the land is restored to you. 2. You're compensated at full fair market value, $2.4 million, and the homeowners keep the land. 3. The homeowners are evicted, lose their equity, and you retake possession of the land with the improvements. She turned to the homeowners. And you 6 families? If this goes to trial and Mr. Kraken wins, which he will, you lose everything. Your down payments, your equity, your homes. You'll be evicted with nowhere to go and no compensation. The courtroom was silent. Judge Delgado closed the file. Mediation is scheduled for December 1st. Figure this out, because if you don't, I will, and nobody's going to like my ruling. Court adjourned. I left the courthouse with Brennan, the weight of Judge Delgado's words settling over me. I had the legal right to demand removal of the homes. I had the legal right to demand $2.4 million. I had the legal right to evict 6 families and retake my land. But did I have the moral right? These families hadn't stolen from me. Marcus Bellamy had. They were victims, just like I was. And now, we were all being forced to the negotiating table, where I held all the cards. Brennan was right. I had leverage, and it was time to use it. The court-ordered mediation was scheduled for December 1st at 9 a.m. in a conference room at the Henry County Courthouse. The mediator was a retired judge named Harold Fitzpatrick, a man in his early 70s with 40 years of experience in property disputes. He'd been assigned by Judge Delgado specifically because of the complexity of the case. When I arrived with Brennan, the conference room was already crowded. The 6 homeowners sat on one side of the table with Sarah Kendall. Crestview's bankruptcy attorney sat alone in the corner, looking uncomfortable. The Henry County attorney, Richard Klein, sat near the door. Fitzpatrick sat at the head of the table, reviewing a thick binder of case documents. Let's begin, Fitzpatrick said. We're here because Judge Delgado believes this case can be settled without trial. I've reviewed the facts. Mr. Carter owns the land. The homeowners occupy structures built on that land without legal authority. The developer committed fraud. Those facts aren't in dispute. He looked around the table. What we're here to decide is how to resolve this fairly. Mr. Carter, you have the floor. I'd spent the previous 2 weeks thinking about what I wanted to say. I stood. I didn't ask for any of this. I inherited 9 acres from my grandmother. I paid the property taxes. I served my country overseas, and while I was gone, Marcus Bellamy bribed a county official, forged documents, and stole my land. I looked at the homeowners. I know you're victims too. You bought homes in good faith. You didn't know Bellamy was a criminal, and I don't want to see you lose everything. Diane Foster's eyes were red, like she'd been crying before the session started. But I'm also a victim, I continued. My land was stolen. My rights were violated. And I deserve compensation. I sat down. Brennan opened a folder and slid a document across the table. This is our proposal, Brennan said. A 9-year ground lease. The homeowners pay Mr. Carter $3,000 per household per month for the right to keep their homes on his land. That's $18,000 per month total, or $216,000 per year. The lease is inheritable and transferable. If the homeowners sell their homes, the lease transfers to the new owners. Sarah Kendall reviewed the document. That's $3,000 per month on top of their existing mortgages. For some of my clients, that's $7,000 to $8,000 per month total. It's a significant financial burden. It's also significantly less than losing their homes entirely, Brennan said. If this goes to trial, Mr. Carter will win. The homeowners will be evicted. They'll lose their down payments, their equity, and the homes themselves. We're offering a solution that lets them stay. James Ritchie spoke up, his voice tight. We understand that. But $3,000 per month is more than some of us can afford. Is there any flexibility? I looked at Brennan. We'd discussed this. The appraised rental value was $3,000 per household. But we'd also discussed compromise. $2,750 per month, I said. Final offer? That's $16,500 per month total. I want a one-time payment of $50,000 per household as consideration for entering the lease. Sarah Kendall calculated quickly. $2,750 per month is $33,000 per year per household, plus $50,000 up front. Over the 99-year lease term, that's over $3 million per household. That's the cost of occupying land you don't own, Brennan said. The alternative is eviction. Judge Fitzpatrick leaned forward. Let's put this in perspective. Ms. Kendall, what did your clients pay for their homes? Between $800,000 and $1.2 million each. And how much equity do they have? Most put down 20%. $100,000 to $140,000 per household. Fitzpatrick turned to the homeowners. If you reject this offer and go to trial, you lose that equity. You lose the homes. You walk away with nothing. If you accept this offer, you pay $2,750 per month, which is less than many people pay in rent, and you keep your homes. Which option makes more financial sense? The room was silent. Diane Foster finally spoke. Can we have a moment to discuss this privately? Fitzpatrick nodded. Take 15 minutes. While the homeowners deliberated, Brennan turned to the Henry County attorney. Richard, we need to talk about the county's liability. Klein shifted uncomfortably. The county's position is that Jessica Thornton acted outside the scope of her authority. We're not liable for her criminal conduct. Your county employee accepted a bribe to falsify tax records, Brennan said. Your system failed to catch it, and my client lost his property because of it. The county is absolutely liable. What are you asking for? $150,000 in damages, plus termination of Jessica Thornton and reforms to your tax assessment process. Klein rubbed his face. I'll need to get approval from the county commissioners. Get it? Because if we add the county as a defendant in the lawsuit, you're looking at a jury trial and potential punitive damages. $150,000 is a bargain. The homeowners returned after 20 minutes. Sarah Kendall spoke for the group. My clients are willing to accept the ground lease at $2,750 per month and the $50,000 upfront payment. But they have conditions. What conditions? Brennan asked. First, the lease must include a right of first refusal. If Mr. Carter ever decides to sell the land, the homeowners have the option to purchase it at fair market value. Brennan looked at me. I nodded. That was reasonable. Second, the lease must be recorded with the county and bind any future owners of the underlying land. If Mr. Carter sells or transfers the property, the lease continues. Agreed, I said. Third, Mr. Carter agrees not to raise the monthly rent for the first 10 years. After that, rent can increase by no more than 3% per year. I thought about it. 3% per year was less than inflation, but it provided some protection for the homeowners against runaway rent increases. Agreed, I said. Kendall nodded. Then we have a deal. Judge Fitzpatrick drafted the settlement agreement on the spot, working from a laptop incorporating the terms we'd negotiated. Ground lease terms, lease term 99 years, beginning January 1st, 2024 monthly rent, $2,750 per household, $16,500 total per month. Upfront payment, $50,000 per household, $300,000 total. Rent increases, none for first 10 years, maximum 3% annually thereafter. Homeowners have option to purchase land if Carter sells transferability, lease transfers with sale of home. By 2 p.m., all 6 homeowners had signed. I signed last, my hand steady. It was done. The settlement with Crestview Development took longer, but Brennan worked with the bankruptcy trustee to carve out a settlement from Crestview's remaining assets. On December 10th, Crestview agreed to pay me $400,000 in damages, plus $85,000 in legal fees, a total of $485,000. The payment would come from the sale of Crestview's remaining undeveloped land and equipment. It's not everything you're owed, Brennan said, but it's everything Crestview has left. Bellamy siphoned off most of the company's assets before filing bankruptcy. We're lucky to get this much. The settlement with Henry County was finalized on December 15th. Damage is a county agreed to pay $150,000 in damages for their role in the fraud. The county also agreed to implement new safeguards in the tax assessor's office to prevent future fraud. Jessica Thornton had already been terminated and was awaiting trial on criminal charges. She'd pleaded not guilty, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. Richard Klein called Brennan to finalize the paperwork. The commissioners aren't happy about this, but they know we screwed up. The $150,000 is approved. On December 20th, I sat down with Brennan to review the final settlement numbers. Total settlement value, ground lease, $16,500/month equals $198,000/year, ongoing upfront payments from homeowners, $300,000 settlement from Crestview Development, $150,000 grand total, $935,000 upfront plus $198,000 per year in perpetuity over the 99-year lease term, assuming no rent increases. That was over $19 million in total revenue. In adjusting for inflation and present value, it was an extraordinary outcome. You turned stolen land into a passive income stream worth nearly $200,000 a year, Brennan said, and you didn't have to evict 6 families or demolish their homes. That's a win. I thought about my grandmother, about the 9 acres she'd bought in 1987 for $18,000, intending to build a retirement home she never got to build. She'd held onto that land for 34 years, paying taxes, keeping it clear, dreaming of what it could become. And now it was generating nearly $200,000 a year. Marcus Bellamy's criminal trial was scheduled for March 2025. He faced 15 federal charges, including bribery fraud, forgery, wire fraud, and mail fraud. If convicted on all counts, he was looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison. The homeowners kept their homes. I kept my land. And Marcus Bellamy was going to pay for what he'd done, not just with money, but with his freedom. Because you can't steal someone's land, bribe public officials, and forge government documents without facing consequences. Bellamy had thought I'd never come back. He thought he could build, sell, and disappear before I even knew what happened. He was wrong. And now he was paying the price. While I collected $16,500 a month from the 6 families living on my 9 acres, the land my grandmother left me, the land Marcus Bellamy stole, the land I got back, and turned into the deal of a lifetime. The ground lease agreements were recorded with Henry County on January 3, 2024. 6 separate documents, one for each household, each bearing the county clerk's official seal and stamp. The leases were now part of the public record, binding, enforceable, and permanent. The homeowners of Heritage Hills were no longer property owners in the traditional sense. They were tenants on my land. They owned the structures, the homes themselves, the improvements, the landscaping. But the 9 acres underneath, that was mine. And every month they paid me $27.50 per household to keep their homes where they stood. Diane Foster was the first to make a payment. The check arrived on January 5th. $2,750. Made out to me, with ground lease, January 2024, written in the memo line. Over the next week, the other 5 checks arrived. By January 12th, I'd deposited $16,500. Oh, it was surreal. I'd inherited 9 acres of undeveloped land from my grandmother. Marcus Bellamy had stolen it. And now I was collecting nearly $17,000 a month from 6 families who'd unknowingly bought homes built on property that was never legally sold. Marcus Bellamy's federal trial began on March 4th, 2025, in the Northern District of Georgia. The trial lasted 8 days. I attended every session, sitting in the gallery with Brennan, watching as the prosecution systematically dismantled Bellamy's defense. The evidence was overwhelming. The emails planning the fraud, the $15,000 bribe to Jessica Thornton, the forged tax deed, the falsified county certification, the financial records showing Bellamy had pocketed nearly $6 million from the sale of homes built on stolen land. Bellamy's attorney tried to argue that Bellamy had acted in good faith, believing the tax auction was legitimate. The jury didn't buy it. The emails were too clear. The intent was too obvious. Bellamy had known exactly what he was doing. On March 14th, the jury returned a verdict. Guilty on all 15 counts. Sentencing was scheduled for May 2nd. Judge Howell reviewed the sentencing guidelines, the evidence, and the victim impact statements, including mine. In my statement, I'd written, Marcus Bellamy stole my land while I was deployed overseas serving my country. Who bribed a public official, forged government documents, and built 6 homes on property he knew he didn't own. He thought I'd never come back, or that I wouldn't fight. He was wrong. His actions cost me 2 years of my life, thousands of dollars in legal fees, and the peace of mind that comes with knowing your property is secure. He deserves the maximum sentence. Judge Howell sentenced Marcus Bellamy to 4 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Back. He was also ordered to pay $1.2 million in restitution, shared between me and the other victims of his fraud schemes. Bellamy was remanded into custody immediately. As the marshals led him out of the courtroom in handcuffs, he looked at me once, a brief, hollow glance, and then he was gone. Jessica Thornton's case moved faster. She'd pleaded guilty in February 2025 to bribery, conspiracy, and falsifying public records in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her sentencing hearing was held on April 10th. The prosecutor recommended 2 years in prison. Thornton's attorney argued for probation, citing her lack of prior criminal history and her cooperation with investigators. Judge Delgado wasn't sympathetic. Miss Thornton, you were a public servant, Delgado said. You held a position of trust. And you sold that trust for $15,000? You falsified official records, helped a developer steal land from a deployed service member, and enabled fraud that cost 6 families their financial security. Thornton was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $50,000 in restitution to me. She began serving her sentence in June 2025. The relationship between me and the Heritage Hills homeowners was tense at first. The early months of 2024, I was the outsider, the man who'd upended their lives, forced them into a ground lease, and turned them into tenants on land they thought they owned. Some of them resented me. I could feel it in the way they avoided eye contact when I drove through the development to inspect the property, in the curt, formal tone of the emails they sent when they had questions about the lease terms. But as the months passed, something shifted. In April 2024, Diane Foster called me. Mr. Carter, I wanted to thank you. I was surprised. Thank me for not evicting us, for giving us a way to stay. I know the lease is expensive, but it's better than losing everything. My husband and I, we were terrified we'd lose our home. You could have taken it, you had every legal right. But you didn't. I didn't know what to say. You were victims too. I didn't want to punish you for Bellamy's crimes. I know. And we appreciate it, more than you know. In June 2024, I started developing the remaining 3 acres of the property, the section that hadn't been built on. I used the settlement funds from Crestview and the county, $635,000 total, to clear the land, install utilities, and begin construction on a home, not a mansion. Just a modest 3-bedroom house with a covered porch, a workshop, and a view of the creek that ran through the back corner of the property. I hired local contractors, pulled permits, and broke ground in July. By December, the house was finished. I moved in on New Year's Day, 2025. For the first time since inheriting the land, I was living on the property my grandmother had left me. The property Marcus Bellamy had tried to steal. The property that now generated nearly $200,000 a year in passive income. On a Saturday afternoon in February 2025, James Ricci knocked on my door. I opened it to find him standing on the porch, holding a 6-pack of beer. I wanted to apologize, he said. For what? For how I treated you when this started. I was angry, scared. I blamed you for the situation we were in. But you didn't create the problem, Bellamy did. And you gave us a way to stay when you didn't have to. He handed me the 6-pack. I know it's not much, but I wanted to say thank you, and I'm sorry. I invited him in. We sat on the porch, drank beer, and talked for 2 hours. He told me about his kids, his job teaching history at the local high school, the fear he'd felt when he realized his home might be taken away. I told him about my grandmother, the deployment, the shock of coming home to find a gated community where my land used to be. By the time he left, we weren't adversaries anymore. We were neighbors. Over the following months, other homeowners reached out. Diane Foster invited me to a Heritage Hills HOA meeting in March. I attended, and for the first time, the homeowners treated me not as a threat, but as a partner. One couple, a woman named Maria Santos and her husband Carlos, stopped by in April with homemade tamales. "We wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood," Maria said, officially. Another homeowner, a retired engineer named Paul Gregory, hired me to consult on a boundary dispute he was having with an adjacent property owner. "You know property law better than anyone I've met," he said. "I figured you'd be the right person to ask." Slowly, the tension dissolved. The homeowners paid their rent on time. I maintained the common areas, the access road, the drainage, the landscaping around the entrance. We stayed out of each other's way, but we also helped each other when needed. Heritage Hills wasn't just a development built on my land anymore. It was a community, and I was part of it. On the 4th anniversary of my grandmother's death, March 14th, 2025, I stood at the edge of the creek on my property, looking out over the 9 acres. 6 luxury homes sat in a semicircle near the entrance. My own home sat on the back 3 acres, overlooking the water. Every month, $16,500 appeared in my bank account, rent from 6 families who'd bought homes built on land Marcus Bellamy stole. Every month, I paid property taxes, maintained the land, and watched the equity grow. I thought about my grandmother, about the dreams she'd had for this land, the retirement home she'd never built, the quiet life she'd planned. She'd held onto this property for 34 years, paying taxes, protecting it, believing it would be worth something someday. She'd been right, just not in the way she'd imagined. Because I was now the unlikely landlord of a 6-home luxury development, collecting nearly $200,000 a year in passive income. Blonde that had almost been stolen? From land Marcus Bellamy thought he could take because I was overseas and wouldn't know until it was too late. I'd been wrong. And now he was in federal prison. Jessica Thornton was in prison. The homeowners had their homes, and I had my land, all 9 acres, with 6 families paying me rent for the privilege of staying, because you can't steal someone's land and expect to get away with it. Marcus Bellamy tried. He failed, and I made sure he paid the price. I stood at the entrance to Heritage Hills on a warm evening in late spring, looking at the wrought iron gate that marked the boundary of my property. The gate that had shocked me 2 years earlier when I'd returned from deployment to find a gated community where my grandmother's undeveloped land used to be. The sign still read, Heritage Hills, a gated community. But now, every time I looked at it, I saw something different. Not a community that had stolen my land, but a community built on my land, living on my land, paying me rent to stay on my land, all 9 acres. Like 3 years I thought about Marcus Bellamy, about the confidence he must have felt when he bribed Jessica Thornton, forged the tax documents, and processed the fraudulent auction. He'd thought 2 years was long enough. Long enough for me to forget about the property. Long enough for him to build 6 luxury homes, sell them for $800,000 to $1.2 million each, and pocket nearly $6 million before I even knew what had happened. He'd thought I was deployed overseas, unreachable, out of touch. That by the time I came back, if I came back, the homes would be sold, the families would be settled, and I'd have no choice but to accept a small settlement and walk away. Marcus Bellamy had thought he could steal someone's land just because they weren't watching. He was wrong. Bellamy had gambled that the forged documents would go unnoticed, that the county wouldn't verify the tax payment records before processing the auction, that the title companies wouldn't question the legitimacy of the tax deed, that the homeowners wouldn't discover the fraud until it was too late to do anything about it. He'd covered his tracks carefully, or so he thought. The fake tax delinquency notice sent to an old address I hadn't lived at in years. The falsified county records showing unpaid taxes. The forged certifications submitted to the title companies during the home sales. But he'd left a trail. The emails to Jessica Thornton, offering $15,000 to process the fraudulent auction. The internal communications with his CFO, admitting the taxes were current and the owner was overseas. The forged county seal on documents that were never issued. Every lie. Every bribe. Forged signature. All documented. all discoverable, all admissible in court. Bellamy had thought he was smarter than the system. He wasn't. I thought about the moment Diane Foster had confronted me at the gate 2 years ago, telling me I was trespassing on private property. "This is my property," I'd told her, holding up the deed. "That deed is outdated," she'd said. "We bought this land from the county." She'd believed it. They'd all believed it. 6 families, trusting that the developer who sold them luxury homes had done his due diligence, had legal ownership, had the right to build. They hadn't known they were buying homes built on stolen land. They hadn't known Marcus Bellamy was a criminal. They hadn't known that one day the real owner would come back and demand his property. But I had come back, and I had fought. The lawsuit had taken 8 months. Discovery, depositions, mediation, settlement negotiations. I could have demanded removal of all 6 homes. I had the legal right. Judge Delgado had made that clear. I could have forced the eviction of 6 families, torn down $5 million worth of structures, and restored my land to its original condition, but I didn't. Because those families were victims too. They'd paid $800,000 to $1.2 million each for homes they thought were built on legally acquired land. They'd trusted Bellamy. They'd trusted the county. They'd trusted the system, and the system had failed them. So I'd offered a compromise, a ground lease. They could keep their homes. I would keep the land, and every month they'd pay me rent for the privilege of staying. $50,050 per household per month. $16,500 total. Nearly $200,000 a year for 99 years. They'd accepted, not because they wanted to, but because the alternative, eviction, financial ruin, the loss of everything they'd invested, was worse. And now, every month, 6 families wrote me a check. For land I'd inherited from my grandmother. For land Marcus Bellamy had stolen while I was deployed overseas. For land I'd fought to reclaim. The first few months had been tense. The homeowners had resented me, seeing me as the enemy rather than the victim. But over time, that changed. They'd realized I could have destroyed their lives, could have taken their homes, their equity, their security. If I hadn't, I'd given them a way to stay. And slowly, resentment had turned to acceptance. Acceptance had turned to understanding. Understanding had turned to respect. Now, when I drove through Heritage Hills, people waved. When I walked to the mailbox, neighbors stopped to chat. When I needed help with a project on my property, James Ricci offered his truck. When I had a birthday, Maria Santos brought tamales. We weren't adversaries anymore. We were a community. Marcus Bellamy was in federal prison, serving a 4-year sentence for fraud, bribery, and forgery. Jessica Thornton was in prison, serving 2 years for accepting a bribe and falsifying public records. The county had paid me $150,000 and implemented new safeguards to prevent future fraud. Crestview Development had paid me $485,000 and filed for bankruptcy. And the 6 homeowners had paid me $300,000 up front, plus $2,750 per month ongoing. Total settlement, $935,000 up front, plus $198,000 per year for 99 years. Over the life of the lease, assuming no rent increases beyond the 3% annual cap, that was over $19 million in total revenue. 9 acres of land my grandmother had bought in 1987 for $18,000. I walked back to my house, the one I'd built on the back 3 acres overlooking the creek, and sat on the porch as the sun set. Marcus Bellamy had called my land abandoned. He'd told his CFO I'd never notice, never care, never come back. He'd built 6 mansions while I was overseas serving my country, thinking I'd be gone long enough for him to finish, sell, and disappear. When I came back, his HOA president told me I was trespassing. Now, those 6 families pay me $16,500 a month. Developers in federal prison. The county clerk lost her job, her freedom, and her reputation. And I own the ground under $6 million homes. I thought about my grandmother, about the land she'd bought, the dreams she'd had, the legacy she'd left me. She'd wanted to build a retirement home here, spend her final years in peace, surrounded by trees and water and quiet. She never got to build that home, but I did. And now I lived on the land she'd protected for 34 years, collecting rent from 6 families who occupied the rest of the property. She would have been proud, not because of the money, but because I'd fought for what was mine, because I'd stood up to a criminal who thought he could steal from a deployed service member, because I'd turned a catastrophe into an opportunity. Marcus Bellamy had learned an expensive lesson. You can't forge documents and steal someone's land just because they're not watching. You can't bribe public officials and expect to get away with it. You can't build 6 luxury homes on property you don't own and think the real owner will just accept it. Bellamy tried. He built 6 mansions on my 9 acres while I was overseas. When I came back, he told me I was trespassing. Now he's in federal prison. And every month, 6 families write me a check. Because you can't build on land you don't own. And if you do, the real owner gets to decide what happens next. I decided they could stay, but they'd pay rent forever. Because the land was mine. The ground was mine. And Marcus Bellamy? He lost everything. His freedom, his company, reputation. All because he thought he could steal 9 acres from a deployed soldier, and no one would ever know. He was wrong. And now, every month, I collect $16,500. From 6 families living on my land, the land Marcus Bellamy stole. The land I fought to reclaim. The land that now generates nearly $200,000 a year. For the rest of my life. And the lives of my children. And their children after that. Because I own the ground. All 9 acres. And no one, not Marcus Bellamy, not Jessica Thornton, not anyone, is ever taking it from me again.